And as its grace, had some powerful conversations today already, and I'm looking forward to more.
Nice. Right on, man. Well, I don't have a whole lot planned for this conversation, but I invited a few people, so we shall see how it goes. Today's conversation, just so you know, it's about trust. That's what we're going to be going over. So I'm going to start the stream here, and then I'll kind of get into the topics that I'm going to bring up. I think this time I'm just going to run all the way through it, and then at the very end, open it up for conversation. See how that goes. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Hey, everybody. Welcome. What's up?
Oh, sorry, I'm inviting some people.
Oh, nice. Right on. Well, for everyone who's joining us in the fifth dimension through time, welcome to today's episode. Today, we are going to be talking about trust here on Happy Healthy Love, how to earn it, how to be trustworthy, and how to give it too. So breaking down today's conversation, I have a couple topics that I'm going to run through, and then at the end, as always, we'll have some time for open discussion. So today, I want to talk about what I think are some of the fundamental components of trust, which are honesty, transparency, punctuality, confidence, being predictable, respect, and this word safe. When I say safe, I'm referring to an individual being a safe person. All right, so starting from the top. Honesty, honestly, I'm not going to get too deep into honesty because that is next week's conversation for this Saturday, or next week on Sunday, 4 p.m. We'll be going deep dive into honesty. But on the surface, honesty is a huge part of trust because if people can't take you for face value of your word, then how are they ever going to trust you? I have some good conversation points for that one, but I'm going to save it for next week. So I'm just going to roll right into transparency. Now, transparency can be a little bit more complicated than it seems on the surface. And transparency is simply how available are you for the truth? How easy is it for people to understand your version of the truth? And transparency, it can take a little bit of work. Transparency means that you have to do things like document, you have to collect data. Taxes is a great example where you can see different applications of people's understanding of the word transparency. You have some people that feel that it is transparent to put everything into their personal tax bracket, and then there are a lot of people that will go through the process of creating businesses so that they can mitigate their tax through several different. But at the end of the day, the idea is that they're presenting every purchase or all of their financial moves for the entire year to the IRS in transparency. Punctuality, that one's pretty obvious as well. That's being on time. But I think this kind of wraps into honesty and keeping your word a little bit. So punctuality requires you to be honest with yourself, and it requires you to be able to break down your word or break down your availability and your commitment to time in a way that is understandable and it's accessible for other people. Punctuality isn't something that punctuality is done far in advance. Punctuality is mostly about being true to your own needs. If it's going to take you an hour and a half to create that visual concept, then you need to be honest and say it's going to take 30 minutes. Maybe even giving yourself room, because maybe sometimes you need extra coffee in the morning and that takes an extra 15 to 30 minutes just to get out the door. Well, being punctual would mean that you would create a space for those days so that you can always be on time. Confidence. Confidence is mostly referring to your ability to respect people's privacy, to not be that gossiper, to have a outstanding ability to identify and then keep private those things that people may or may not, it may or may not be even apparent at first. Like, people aren't always forthcoming with what they considered something that they'd want kept in confidence. And it's kind of our job as people to navigate respectfully. Again, and this one's pretty simple. Like, there's this kindergarten idea, which is like, how would you feel? And I know that seems very, very simple, but often the simplest things are the most effective. And if it works for a child, it should be able to work for us. So I guess like a good way to go about confidence is, if you have something about somebody and you're thinking about sharing it, you got to ask yourself, like, how would you feel, and is it even helpful? Something I've definitely brought up before, but I want to bring up here, is this Buddhist principle called the Four Gates. And I feel that if you use the Four Gates, that you're most likely going to be speaking with confidence every time, or in confidence every time. And so the gates, and there's no particular order. It's supposed to be, if it'll either go through all four or it goes through none. So the gates are: is it kind? Is it relevant? Is it true? And is it the right time? Now, if you can do those things, most of the time you're going to keep yourself out of trouble. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you can't hold people accountable. There are respectful ways that you can talk about things that should be kept in confidence, that are constructive, without being judgmental or without even being very specific, but just working on your personal perspective on how you can be better for this situation. All right, I think I beat that one up a little bit. So being predictable. Well, why is this trustworthy? This ties back into a little bit into transparency and punctuality. The more predictable you are, the more people can trust that they know where and what you're doing. And that goes a long way for a lot of people. And all right, and to tie it all in together, I want to talk about respect. I kind of rushed to this one because I feel like this is going to be the bulk of the conversation, because this one, it has a lot of interpretations. Respect can be a hard balance, because you're factoring yourself and your environment, which can be one person or a group of people. We're talking about trust building, because we're always trust building with people. I guess you can trust build with animals, but it's pretty easy. Dogs are like, they immediately trust you for everything, which is great. And I feel like that's actually kind of how I approach trust, is I trust first, and you have to actually earn distrust, which I feel like isn't a very common practice, which makes things like business and whatnot in America extremely hard. But getting back to respect. So how do you be respectful in a way that's going to create trust? Well, keeping information in confidence, of course, is a good way of doing that. But you can go even further. Like, respect can be little acts of chivalry. Respect can be knowing when to stand up for yourself or others. Respect can be, it can be a multitude of things. Let's see. Hey, Joshua, how are some ways that you feel that you harbor respect in a way that builds trust?
Can you clarify harboring respect?
So that was a good example. Being respectful of yourself, not jumping into an answer before you completely understand the questions, so you don't misstep and don't misrepresent yourself. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think that fundamentally being respectful or full of respect helps people trust you. And I wanted to see if that resonated with you at all, and if there's any ways that you exemplify or express respect that you notice helps people trust you.
Yeah, actually, I do feel that I have been in life situations kind of by chance and also intention that I have learned how to exude respect very well. One of those things, I'm lucky enough to be from Texas, so I very much have that stereotypical Southern gentleman about me. Some people that are a little bit more quote unquote progressive could possibly disagree with those forms of respect, but I'm kind of old fashioned, and I feel in many places people uh, like appreciate that. And then another thing too, where I've gained an immense amount of sharing and harboring respect is through being in my yoga teacher training. Um, I learned how to quiet my mind first, so that way I can allow myself to just hold space for people when they're being who they are, and not necessarily need to jump in and feel like or approach a conversation or an experience with other people like as a person who has to have the stage all the time. And then another thing too is that as a man, um, it's a unique opportunity to be in a cohort of school with just all women. And so I was the only man in that, and straight man at that. So I had to really, really learn how to have an immense amount of respect in my being in order to simply not look like an asshole. Like, but especially when it came to, because ironically, um, places like that, yoga teacher training and stuff, these are very, very open places where people have the opportunity to really show who they really are underneath the skin, underneath the surface, immense authenticity. And I happen to be bear witness to men who have not passed that test of being fully open and authentic around women. They've shown ugly parts of themselves. I've been fortunate to have like I said, the background and training that I have to hopefully not mess that up for myself. And I mean, I also am like you in the sense of I trust first, and then other individuals need to earn my distrust, or like with respect, I respect people first, and then they have to kind of earn my lapse of respect. But even if they do, I still am pretty respectful, just because I value dignity very highly.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for your share. Very good points in there. Um, yeah, and so I like that you kind of had a therapeutic angle, because I wanted to bring it all together under this term safe, which I believe comes from the world of therapy first. But this idea safe, it's something that you can become. That means that other people can trust you with anything, really, with information, with requests. They can trust you in general as a human being. And so I think that being trustworthy is an underlining quality of a safe person. Now, trust itself, it's, like I want to spend a second talking about why. Why do you even want to be trustworthy, or why do you want to give trust? Well, being trustworthy is part of reputation. And if you are extremely trustworthy, this can precede you, and you'll get plenty of opportunities. Like Joshua was saying earlier, like having the ability to hold space and to not be a problem in social environments. Being known as somebody who can do that means that nobody will ever worry about bringing you in a social environment and you being anything but a positive influence. And so that level of trust now can translate into opportunity.
Oh, totally, man. That's been a lot of my growth area. I just happen to be grown up in a family where it's highly social but highly not socially aware, and my family can be that type of extremely rowdy, annoying people at like an event or at some place and stuff, and I had to really learn how to take myself out of that type of conditioning.
Yeah. And it can be really hard to learn how to give trust back when somebody figures out how to take it, how to earn your lack of trust, if you will. And so that then that rolls perfectly into the opposite side of this conversation, which is how do you give trust? Like outside of so even both you and I, Joshua, we both said that we kind of have a similar idea, which is you give first, you trust first, and then you kind of see if like they can keep it. But I mean, I honestly have a bias where I don't just trust somebody to do anything just because they haven't earned this trust. Like there's like a bell curve, if you will, and the longer you go without doing something that is untrustworthy, personally, the more I increase the threshold of what I feel I can trust you with, whether that be information or tasks or social environments or money or whatever it is. It's definitely, for me, it's like the equation for work. It's effort over time. And the more effort in the shorter period of time, or the more time, the larger my trust threshold can go. And you'll start, like, if you're trying to be my friend or if you're trying to be my business partner, like, you'll find yourself getting more and more successful convincing me to do this or that or the other, the longer you've been at it, and the more trustworthy the more you've maintained your trustworthy status.
I'd like to add something.
Yeah, please.
Cool. Well, one thing, interestingly enough, that I found too, as far as kind of this whole dynamic of transparency and stuff, is that people who I found that folks who have who are willing and able to and like be forthcoming about their flaws and ownership of things that they're not necessarily proud of about themselves, I feel that is very trustworthy. But with a caveat, some people could do that manipulatively. But most of the time, I think it's pretty much a good to go thing where you can see people who are able to be vulnerable with their shortcomings in life, and then even more express kind of like what they take from it. And then you could observe that change in them. That's always a powerful way of trust building, I believe, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure. And I feel like that would wrap very well under transparency, but I appreciate you bringing that out to the light in such a manner. Sorry, I'm having a bit of a brain malfunction here for a sec as I try to figure out where I want to go next. Yeah, so in my vulnerability, because that's kind of like what we were just talking about, I've been having a hard time with the technical aspects. Like, I'm a one-man show, right? And so like I've been learning how to do the video effects. So if you're jumping in on the audio, in case you didn't know, these are recorded and they are multi-streamed, which is a whole nother thing that I had to learn. And I'm in school, so I've definitely had some hiccups as I've been learning how to do this film process. But I think in the long run, when I get really good, like those moments of vulnerability, like those quote unquote gag reels, if you will, like they're gonna really have a level of trust or building to my brand, because people are going to be looking at me like, oh, this guy is real. He's not some robot CNN news machine that's just being what the teleprompter tells him to. He's actually out here being vulnerable, being a human being, making mistakes in front of us and moving on. I love that you kind of mentioned vulnerability. I think that like apologies, obviously, if you transgress someone's trust, or you're unable to say withhold your word, or you make a mistake, then of course like being apologetic is a good trust building exercise, because then people can trust you to self audit, When you're apologetic for the right times or the right reasons, that lets people know, like, okay, this person, they hold themselves accountable, which is great, so I don't have to, which, that's a great way to build trust. Oh, I had somebody pop in the chat. Looks like, though, they just wanted to do some advertising. They should have stuck around. Oh, here we go. Oh, no, and there he goes. That's too bad, because I was gonna have that guy do a plug. I love to have people, when they pop in, tell us who they are and what they're doing, but that guy just wanted to drop a text, so his loss. I think also something you might have been alluding to was the idea of lies and how they are the killer of trust. Probably, actions can be a killer of trust, but actions that are within honesty, transparency, punctuality, and confidence, like, you're going to be okay. But if you are backing your lies, like, that's got to be the biggest killer of trust. It is, in my opinion. And, like, there's a billion ways to go about lying, and I think most of us do it. And if you don't think you're lying, then you're lying to yourself. Because a lot of us, it just happens on accident. We don't really have the awareness all the time to be as present as we need with information and with what we're saying to always have honesty. Like, whether we mean to or not, our brains kind of create this short gap measure when you're running low on thought fuel or you're running out of space within, like, what you know. Your brain will start to reach out into other sections and it'll start to fill in the gaps. Or if you're having a hard time pulling a memory out of your head, like, it will definitely reach over to adjacent memories and start filling in the gaps. And so very often, if you're not 100% aware of what you're saying at all times, you're most likely telling little white lies you may not even know about. And that can be destroying your trust. Word choice is going to be a big one. Like, not everyone has kids, but most people are at some point in their life, like, are aware of and know how to have a PC dialect, or to have that, like, code switch where they can have, if you would, a professional dialect where they're not cussing, where they're not, like, yelling. They have good inside voice. They have good tempo. Those kinds of things are important too. My cat trying to get in. What do you got to say about trust, Toulouse? I don't trust this cat an inch. He's the most unpredictable, unpunctual, disrespectful cat I think I've ever lived with. But, man, I love him.
The cat's a huge drama queen, but I love him too. He's very fluffy.
Yeah, if only I was that cute and fluffy, then maybe I'd be loved too. No, I am loved. Well, yeah, I don't think I have a whole lot more going on for the topic today. Was there anything that you wanted to jump in, or anything burn in your bridges on the idea of trust?
Well, luckily I haven't burned all my bridges. I haven't really burned that many bridges, but I have experienced people burn bridges for me, which is weird to experience. Back in a time of my life whenever I used to overly trust people, and what you're saying is, like, you're not necessarily trust people right off the bat with certain things, but that's where I was kind of messing up in the past, was being overly trusting too early without people necessarily earning that kind of trust from me, and that resulted in me having kind of a mesh relationships and kind of a social dynamic of people who were not trustworthy and not trust extending either. And there's a time where the proverbial throwing the baby out with the bathwater happened, and people would kind of disregard me due to my associations that I had to learn really quick. Because people also would say things like, oh, well, your reputation isn't really predicated off of other people that you associate with. But I learned in the real world of life that is completely false, and that your associations do determine your reputation, and the reality of life. And I had to really take a big step back and look at who I was associating with, who I was trusting for what, who was looking at my trust. Relationships are very complicated for some, very graceful for others, but at the end of the day, it's a part of life that each and every one of us has to be a part of, unless you choose to just go and live in a cave or a mountain or something, and be a monk or whatever. But even that, someone's going to wander up there and ask you a bunch of questions, maybe. But so yeah, that's where I'm at. It's very, very important to understand the dynamics of the relationships you have. And there's this saying, I want to just finish it with this, is that it comes from the Lakota Indian tribe, and it's roughly used in a lot of different spiritual and healing circles. It's called, people shorten it, say aho, but aho actually is short for aho mataki owasid, which means on behalf of all of my relations I speak. So it is said. I've said it. I have said it on the behalf of my relations, and that understanding of the word just, it for me took it to a whole different level in how I regard my relationships and my reputation on behalf of all of my relations. Aho.
Aho. I love that. I think a lot of people say that, especially in like fire ceremonies, or a lot of us hippies out here in Arizona. But you kind of brought something up that fired up this idea inside of me, and so I want to bring it out because this feels like the right container.
Bring them out.
Organizational trust. That one seems to be very dicey and messy. Like, for example, the government. That's an organization. There are a lot of people that do and a lot of people that don't trust the government. And the only thing that there are more than people who do or don't trust the government are reasons that people do or do not trust the government. And so if you are like me and you're kind of a business person, how do you build trust as an organization? Well, I think that a lot of the things that I still applied, and so for those of us who are joining late, going back over just kind of in general what I consider to be the components of being trustworthy, keeping your word, or in a word, honesty, transparency, punctuality, keeping confidence, being predictable, respectful, and as Joshua so greatly added kind of there at the end, is being apologetic, being able to be vulnerable to your own limitations and mistakes. So as a business, that has an entire different level of commitment. As a human being apologetic for a mistake made can be as simple as, I'm so sorry that I hurt you. But as a company, where you're taking people's money and they don't owe you or know you, you have to kind of go above and beyond. You have to actually do your best to measure out the scale, like using the same resource, so in this case, money, and try to return, and if not better, what it is that they lost through your incorrect action in order to recreate or reestablish that trust. And that kind of integrity can be expensive, which is why, it can be hard to maintain that level of trust in business. My cousin actually just popped in, and I'm going to invite her to speak and see how she's doing. Hey, how are you? Oh, she hopped on. So I was actually just transitioning into business and kind of like what the trust is in that kind of environment. But I want to go back because I feel like there's some good opportunity to reflect here and talk about some of the like I just did this, but some of the topics that we just went over and the idea and the theme of trust. So honesty, transparency, punctuality, confidence, being predictable, being respectful, and ideally being a safe person. So I've been talking for a second. I'm going to open it up to the floor and see if anybody has anything to add. I didn't quite catch you there, but that's all right. Joshua, how you doing?
Oh, I just wanted to say, hey, like, drop the link for this recording in here
That is a good idea.
for your cousin.
Yeah, I should do that. Because I'm actually just about out of conversation space here today, unfortunately. But yeah, I'll drop the link in the description so that way you guys can catch the recording. Well, that's all I have on trust today. Next week on Sunday, we'll be going over honesty. We'll be talking about hopefully I want to dive deeper into higher level honesty, or what I would say is like more true versions of honesty, not just kind of like superficial surface level honesty, but being able to be honest with yourself in a way that helps you do things like create boundaries and stuff like that. But yeah, that's all I have today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday, where we'll be talking about my favorite topic, which is conscious capital, how to make money with your brains. All right, guys, that's it for me today. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
Much love.